Hey everyone, welcome back to another Muscle Foundry video. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed after the first video. It is honestly really quite humbling to see so many people who did subscribe and enjoy the content. I've gotten a lot of good feedback and also some good ideas for future content, and we will be producing it on the channel. There's some really cool things that I will be working on. The next video is going to be more focused on some very easy recipes and kind of diet and meal prep, because I know that's a big concern for a lot of people, in terms of like limited time. But in this video, I want to tackle another series of questions that I was getting, and that's regarding things like whey protein, supplementation. Is it necessary to take any of this stuff? Because, well, quite frankly, I think that there's a lot of questions people have, and if you've ever been to like a supplement store or you looked online, there are so many different pills and powders and drinks and all of that stuff. It can be quite mind-boggling. So I want to go through some of the supplements that I actually do think are pretty good. This, by the way, is also, yes, an article. Again, you can check it out linked in the video description. There is no sign up or any of that stuff. It's just there. It's basically this video in article form. So if you prefer the article form, you want to share it with your friends, or maybe just kind of have like a reminder, you can do that. I will also link to the various studies as well in article, just because it makes it easier rather than having a crap ton of links, so you guys can kind of just check it out as necessary. I just want to mention that there's a key word here when it comes to supplementation. It's supplementation. So in other words, I would still advocate that you have a fairly reasonable diet. So for example, fruits, veggies, decent proteins, so that's chicken, beef, replace that as necessary if you're, not a dirty carnivore. Obviously you want good carb sources. And like I said in my previous video, you do not have to be perfect. You do not have to eat, every single meal of like tilapia and rice. It can have a lot of variety. You can certainly have your cheat meal here or there. But just in general, you don't want to just have absolutely no fruits, absolutely no vegetables and be like, well, I've taken a multivit, so I'm good. It doesn't work like that. And again, supplements are there to essentially bolster your, kind of journey, not act as a crutch. But with that said, now let's really get into the first one. By far, one of the easiest things to recommend here are omega-3 fish oils. Now, the caveat is, if you happen to have a diet that already is pretty full of foods that contain omega-3s, for example, salmon, oily fish, those type of things, then you probably won't need this as much. But if you're someone that hates the taste of like, fish or what have you, and you don't typically have other foods that are high in omega-3s, then obviously taking a supplement is a pretty good decision. But there are basically studies to show that we will see a reduce in cardiovascular disease, reduce your blood pressure. There's also some studies that show that it could actually improve things like protecting you against dementia, cognitive decline, PTSD, and also reducing inflammation. And if you're a guy, well, there's also some studies to show that it potentially helps to improve your testosterone levels. Now, again, obviously, no supplement is going to be a perfect one, but what it's worth, I usually take at least 1 to 2 omega-3 pills a day, and I have done for several months now, and quite frankly, I think that it has been quite beneficial. Now, vitamin D is another one that's pretty easy to recommend. Your requirements for vitamin D basically will depend somewhat on your diet, but also where you live. You may be surprised to learn with my British accent that I live in the United Kingdom, and the UK, it does have some months of summer, but it also has a lot of very dark months, obviously, as you start to get into autumn and then winter, that type of thing. And frankly, many of us are also very much in offices and just not outside as much as perhaps would be ideal. In fact, when I was commuting into London, when I was living outside of London, it would be like an hour and a half to 2 hours, essentially, journey. Much of that was on the train or the undergrounds. I would maybe see like 15 to 20 minutes walking. And quite frankly, it was like the sun didn't start to rise until almost 9 a.m.-ish in the winter, and you would get like maybe 10 minutes of precious sunlight. And then pretty much for the rest of the day, you would be in the office, maybe you would go out to get lunch, and then you would be walking home again in the dark, because by the time like 4:30, 5 o'clock rolled around, the sun had started to descend, and that's obviously not good in terms of vitamin D. So, vitamin D has a lot of things it can benefit you with. Obviously, one of the obvious ones is that it can improve things like your bone health, and obviously that's, well, really good because you don't want brittle bones. There is also improving your cardiovascular system. Yet again, there has been some evidence that it can improve your immune system, coughs, colds, that type of thing. And also even your chances of cancer can allegedly be reduced as well, and potentially battling things like depression and anxiety. Now, what I will say is that the recommended amount of vitamin D a day is around 800 IU. But, and again, this is my personal intake. I want to stress this is personal. I'm not recommending that you take this, but I personally will supplement with 4,000 IU a day. And in the winter, I may even go up to 8,000. Again, that's worked well for me. But in the summer, I typically reduce it down to about 4,000. But in the winter, especially if it's like really miserable, really crappy outside, then I'll typically go to 8,000. I'm not suggesting that you do that. Obviously, it's going to be very much personal based on, again, where you're living, what your situation is in terms of how much you go outside. But, you know, that's my personal thing. Now, whey protein. This is perhaps one of the most cliche supplements when it comes to bodybuilding. And I think really the word supplement and whey protein, and this is going to be perhaps a little bit controversial to say, it's almost not true. Now, yes, it does supplement in terms of like your diet, but it can actually be more thought of as an actual meal. So basically, whey protein is what I personally use if you don't want dairy products. Then perhaps you may want to go with something like a pea protein or what have you. Again, I haven't had any experience with that. I use whey protein. There are different variants of whey protein. You can get them in tons of different flavors. And I will say that it makes certain foods really nice. So for example, you can have your oats in the morning and you can throw some whey protein in, like chocolate whey protein. It can be pretty great, for a very simple recipe for kind of like a dessert type of thing. You can have like Greek yogurt, throw some like a scoop of whey protein in, maybe add some like frozen fruit and berries, and it can be almost kind of dessert-like. You can also freeze it in the, put it in the freezer for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, what have you. And it can be kind of a sweet treat as well if you want to add some cinnamon, maybe just a smidgen of honey, depending on your taste buds. So basically, whey protein, it is not some, it's not some magical thing. Despite the fact that it was in a lot of bodybuilding magazines and, it's kind of like synonymous with big, strong muscles. The reality is that you can get pretty much the exact same effect by just eating something like a chicken breast. The benefits of a whey protein are, 1, it tastes good. 2, it's very easy to take, so it's great after, for example, a heavy gym session. You can maybe have that and a banana or maybe some dextrose, in other words, a fast-acting sugar, just to kind of replenish your muscle glycogen stores and maybe just start the repair process of the muscles. And then like an hour later or what have you, you can be like, okay, well now I'm actually going to eat. This could be pretty good if you have to do like, chores, you have to go to the shop or something like that, so you're not like absolutely starving hungry. And there are other benefits as well, like if you're going around town, you'll probably notice that there's a really, like, I say this again, mostly as a Brit, I think it's a little better, especially in certain parts of the US, but there's a lot of like little cafes and stuff in the UK where it's like, okay, you can get a bagel really easily. You could get some type of breakfast bar or what have you, and obviously you can get coffee fine, but the protein can be an absolute pain in the ass cheeks. And so just saying to yourself, okay, well, I know I've got the carbs sorted because, every Costa, every Starbucks, every small cafe will have like bananas and apples and what have you available. So I can get like a couple of things of that. I can get my carbs in, and then I can have maybe like a couple of scoops of whey protein and I'm good. You don't need whey protein. You can certainly do without it. It's just a nice thing to have in your cupboard if you, again, are going to be going traveling or you just need it for some specific reason. I do use it personally. I don't kind of overthink it. I just take it as necessary to help get my protein in for the day. But again, it is not a replacement for every single meal under the sun. Next thing I want to talk to you guys about is creatine. So creatine comes in several different forms. You can get ethyl ester, which tastes like crap, at least the last time I personally had it, and I don't think it's any more effective, at least in the studies that I last looked at. The version that I would recommend personally is just plain old creatine monohydrate. Don't pay tons of money for this stuff, like just get a cheap creatine monohydrate. So what creatine actually does essentially is draw water into your muscle cells, and obviously that can give them a fuller look. So you just basically look bigger. But it also has various other benefits as well. Without getting too much into the technical weeds here, because I want to keep this video really simple and digestible. Essentially what it does is it helps the muscle itself store more energy. So this can be beneficial if, for example, you're lifting heavy weights, you'll be able to do more reps, or if you're going for like a run or doing something that's like cardiovascularly intensive, it's going to just basically mean that the muscles just have a little bit more energy, a little bit more oomph. As a very simple example, if you're able to do a specific weight at like 12 reps, you may be able to squeeze like 13 or 14 out. With creatine, it is highly well studied at this point. There is basically no drawback. You don't need to cycle it. You can stay on creatine essentially forever. The dose is around 5 grams per day. And as for when to take it, don't overthink it. There are some small benefits, I think, if you take it just prior to the gym or like an hour before. But again, don't overthink it, guys. If you're taking like a multivit or something like that in the morning, or you know, whatever's good for you, just take the bloody thing when it's convenient and when you won't forget. Now, there are some people who would suggest that you basically front load it. So what this basically means, again, is that the recommended amount is 5 grams a day. What you can do is quadruple that, so that's 20, and you take that for like, I think it's a 2-week period. And what this basically does is, because creatine takes a certain amount of time to essentially get into your muscles and to saturate your, well, just basically to get into your system and saturate your body, you basically get the benefits faster. Many packages of of creatine will actually suggest you do this. Personally, I feel like I've got a hair there. I do. That's annoying. Personally, I don't. I just take the regular amount of 5, and that's it. And there's a couple of reasons behind this. I found that if I take 20, my stomach is super sensitive, and I basically start getting small digestive issues. Like, it's not terrible, but it is noticeable. And the second reason is, personally, I will start to look a little bit bloated. If I do the 20. Now, it does go down, the bloat, but I'm just like, you know what? I'm okay waiting a little bit for the results. Like, I'm cool. It's not that big of a deal to me. Like, it's gonna come, so that's fine. So again, I personally do not recommend that you front load it. You can. It's nothing wrong with it. It's not gonna kill you. It's just personally something that I do not do. Now, this one's going to sound a little bit new agey and almost like it's, I don't know, almost fake, but believe me, it is pretty well studied at this point, and that is ashwaganda. Again, this is available fairly cheaply online. You can buy it in pill form and that type of thing. You can also find it as an additional ingredient in many other kind of like mixture supplements, but I personally just take the base, you know, kind of like pill form. I will also add that while ashwagandha does have many promising things, I'll get into them in just a second, I personally only take it for one major benefit, and I can attest to this personal benefit. So there are studies in 2019 and 2015, respectively, that showed that in overweight males, I think it was like almost a 15% gain in testosterone in the 2015 study, excuse me. There was also some evidence to show that males between 18 and 50 gained additional muscle, and they also were stronger as well. And that's nice. To be honest with you, 15% of additional testosterone in overweight males, it doesn't necessarily translate into healthy people. You know, let's say you've got like a 15-ish% body fat or something like that, you know, you're kind of like typical, and you've got like a regular testosterone level. Is it going to benefit? The studies don't 100% conclusively show that. And even if they were, transferable. Let's say you were to get 15%. It's not massive. It's not like it's going to totally change how you look. But then again, 15%, hey, why not? It's better than 0%, right? Again, ashwagandha is fairly cheap anyway, but there are a couple of other very nice benefits of ashwagandha. Firstly, it may improve fertility in men. Now, depending on your perspective and whether you want kids or not, I'll leave that for your imagination, whether you think it's good. But there are also a lot more reasons that I think ashwagandha is worth taking. The first is that it helps to reduce cortisol levels, and that's a stress hormone. And by byproduct, if you do have some anxiety and so on, it can help with that. Now, personally, I don't have anxiety, so I don't really have the ability to comment on whether that is going to benefit you or not. Like, I can't say whether it's reduced my anxiety because I don't really suffer from anxiety. However, I can personally say that the next thing has helped me, and that is sleep. So ashwagandha, there are many studies now to illustrate that it does seemingly improve your sleep. I personally take ashwagandha just before bed, like an hour or so, and I start feeling a little bit sleepy. I would not say that I have insomnia, but I do have some issues falling asleep. Once I've fallen asleep, I can just kind of like go KO. But my brain can get a little bit like, let's say, busy at night, and so it can take a little bit longer for me to fall asleep. Generally, it's not too bad, but I will say ashwagandha, it's certainly not a miracle cure. It's not like, oh, this is like made things massively improved. It's not like, oh, I can't sleep without it. However, it has made a small difference, and quite frankly, I will take that. You know, I've noticed that I tend to wake up a little bit less as well during the night. As for strength, because there are studies to illustrate that your strength has gone up, as I mentioned earlier, I can't say that conclusively for myself because I have been cutting recently. I'm kind of on a main gain at the moment, slight cut. Previously I was cutting quite significantly, and so I started to ironically take ashwagandha as I was cutting. So obviously if you're cutting your calories, it's not exactly conducive for, like, you know, 1 rep max improvements. So I can't really say that conclusively. Now, the very last thing I want to talk to you guys about is a multivitamin. There are a lot of studies to show whether it does or doesn't improve your health. Personally, I think of a multivitamin as kind of like, I guess, more of an insurance policy. Now, the very best thing to do is to get a blood test and to figure out from your doctor if you have, let's say, a shortage of a specific vitamin, of a specific mineral, so you can address that directly. But realistically, it's quite difficult to do that, and also realistically, it's quite difficult to get pretty much all of the nutrients and other things you need in food. So I personally just take a multivitamin, just because I figure, well, even if it's only going to make a marginal difference, I would rather do it. They're pretty cheap. Just make sure you get one from a reasonably reputable brand, and that's pretty much it. So anyway, guys, I think that's just about it for this particular video. I know it's been kind of a drier one, but I want to talk about this stuff because I get so many people who have asked me some of these questions. Like, just recently, I've had a couple of people in the gym, my local gym, ask me, like, what's the best protein powder? And I've also had some DMs about, like, creatine and other things. And again, I'm not ragging on people for asking this stuff, because ultimately, if you don't ask, if you don't have the question of, like, is this good? Should I do this? Then obviously you're not going to learn. So that is totally good. My only caution would be that if you're on, especially like on a limited budget, just don't blow all of your funds on this kind of stuff, because ultimately it's like, well, let's just say back in the day when I first started the gym, I spent so much money on supplements just because I was reading them about in a magazine and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of buying them and it's like, oh, is this any good? Is this any good? Like, at one point, I think I had, like, I don't know, like, I can't even remember half the crap I was taking. It's just like, oh, what's this? ZMA. And I was taking, you know, BCAAs. To be fair, BCAAs are pretty decent, but I was taking so many of these different, you know, Tribulus, I think, was another one, and all this other stuff. And ultimately, most of it just really didn't make any difference. So what I would say is, you know, kind of pick a couple of supplements smartly based on your requirements. So if you're not having enough oily fish, then maybe go omega-3s. But if your diet is pretty full in that and you've got loads of sunlight, then just don't spend that money. With that said, guys, take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.